Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The night was too quiet. A thick fog had rolled in earlier that evening, blanketing the small town in a heavy silence. The usual sounds, distant car engines, faint hums from the old streetlights, even the occasional rustle of a stray dog, had faded into nothingness. Now, all that remained was the sound of my own breath. But something was off. I couldn't pinpoint it at first. It wasn't just the stillness, though that alone was unsettling. It was the way the silence seemed to grow, pressing in on me from all sides. There were moments when I thought I heard something, a whisper, maybe just beyond the edge of my hearing. I froze, straining to catch it, but nothing came. It was late. Far too late for me to be walking this street alone. But there I was, under the weak glow of the street lamps, making my way through the winding alleyways of a neighborhood that, until recently, felt safe. Comfortable, even. Now it felt like I was being watched. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. It wasn't unusual to feel a little jumpy at night. The fog, the quiet, it made everything seem more intense than it really was. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I quickened my pace. The crunch of my boots on the gravel was the only sound, and I couldn't help but listen to it, watching the way the mist curled around my legs like fingers reaching for me. Just as I passed the old church on the corner, I thought I heard it again. A voice, faint and distorted. The chill in my spine told me it wasn't my imagination. I stopped, heart racing. I turned, scanning the empty street behind me. Nothing. Get a grip, I muttered under my breath. There was no one there. The street was empty, as it should have been. But that didn't make me feel any better. In fact, the emptiness made everything worse. The houses, their windows dark and lifeless, seemed to stare at me. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, twisting and flickering just beyond reach. I couldn't tell if it was the fog or something else, something deeper. I took another step, and then, there it was again. A whisper. But this time, it was clear. It wasn't just a sound, it was a word. My name. I spun around. Nothing. The street was as empty as before. No one. But the whisper lingered in my ears, a cold reminder that I wasn't alone. Panic began to rise in my chest. I turned back toward the alley and broke into a run, my footsteps echoing loudly in the empty streets. I didn't dare look over my shoulder. The darkness felt like it was closing in on me, the fog wrapping tighter around my body with each step. I knew the way home, but I also knew that I wasn't going to make it there tonight. Something was waiting. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I ran. The cold, damp fog clung to my skin, making every breath feel heavier, every footstep more desperate. My heart was pounding in my chest, too loud, too fast. Each time my feet hit the pavement, I expected to hear the sound of someone, or something, following me. But there was nothing. I rounded the corner, my legs aching, lungs burning, and found myself in front of a house I didn't recognize. It was strange. I'd walked down this road countless times, but now everything was different. The streetlights flickered uncertainly overhead, casting elongated shadows that seemed to move on their own. The house in front of me, with its peeling paint and dark windows, was unfamiliar, but it wasn't just that. Something about it didn't belong. It wasn't supposed to be here. The whisper returned, louder this time, sharper. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it was meant for me. The voice felt so close, as if someone was standing right behind me, their breath hot against my ear. I spun around, my body tense, muscles quilled with dread. No one. I was alone. But the unease was growing, thick and suffocating. What was happening to me? I had to get out of here, away from this place, but the fear kept me rooted to the spot. I was standing in the middle of the street, frozen, my mind racing, unable to make sense of what was real and what wasn't. I forced myself to move. My legs, still shaky, carried me forward, but my eyes kept darting to the dark alleyways, the deserted houses. It was like the whole world had turned on me. The familiar quiet had been replaced with something far worse, an oppressive silence, one that seemed to be closing in on me with every step. The streetlights, once reliable, now flickered sporadically, casting unsettling shadows that stretched far too long across the pavement. I didn't know where to go anymore. The way home was blurred, distorted by the fog, the twisted landscape of my growing panic. The shadows were the worst part. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The way they shifted and seemed to breathe. But now, there was no denying it. There was something wrong with the way the darkness moved. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the fog. These weren't shadows from the streetlights. These were things, twisting and slithering just beyond the corner of my vision. I tried to push the thought away, get a grip, but that only made it worse. The more I denied it, the more real they became. I could feel the weight of them behind me, brushing against my skin, pressing in from every direction. My heartbeat raced, blood pounding in my ears. There it was again. A whisper. My name. Again. It wasn't just a voice this time. I could hear it too clearly, like it was coming from inside my own head. A pulse of cold dread filled me, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And then, like a trigger had been pulled, I snapped into motion. My body surged forward, pushing me to run. But where? Where could I run? The fog had thickened, reducing my vision to mere inches in front of my face. It felt as though the air itself was closing in around me, suffocating me. The path ahead, once clear, was now a blur of shapes and shifting figures. I stumbled, unable to find my footing, but the sense of being pursued was relentless. I forced myself to keep moving, heart slamming against my chest. Ahead, I saw something, an opening in the fog, a gap between two houses. It looked like an alley, leading to another street. Maybe the end of the block would bring me back to the main road. But as I ran towards it, the whisper came again, louder this time. More insistent. The words finally came through clear enough to understand. Don't go there. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My feet stopped moving, rooted to the ground. It was like someone had reached into my thoughts, wrapped its fingers around my mind, and squeezed. The alley was just a few feet away, but the warning had stopped me. I could feel it. The air was heavier now, oppressive, like the fog itself was holding me in place. I glanced at the alley again. The fog had thickened around it, and from this distance, it looked wrong. It wasn't the alley that had changed, it was me. I wasn't sure what it was, but there was something about that dark opening that was both familiar and terrifying. A sound broke through the silence. A faint scuffle. A shuffling of feet. The hair on my neck stood up again, and this time I didn't hesitate. I ran. I didn't know where I was going anymore. My legs carried me forward, not towards any particular destination, but away from whatever was behind me. The fog and the shadows were everywhere, closing in. Every corner I turned led me into another stretch of unknown. The world was twisting, bending into something unrecognizable. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay in control. I couldn't breathe. Every step felt heavier than the last, each one dragging me deeper into the suffocating fog. The sound of my feet hitting the wet pavement echoed in my ears, too loud, too jarring. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving, had to outrun whatever was lurking just out of sight. The alley stretched before me, the walls of the old houses rising up like silent, watchful sentinels. The darkness between them seemed to pulse, as if the night itself were alive, stretching its cold fingers toward me. I looked over my shoulder once, half expecting to see something there. But there was nothing. Still, the feeling of being followed didn't fade. It hung over me like a thick shadow, pressing on my chest, suffocating me. I quickened my pace, my heart racing faster with each step. The fog, thick and choking, seemed to swirl around me, blurring my vision, distorting everything. It was like walking through a dream, a nightmare, really. The shadows, they weren't just shifting anymore. Now, they were moving of their own accord, crawling along the ground, sliding up the walls. They were stretching toward me, reaching for me. I couldn't tear my eyes away, couldn't stop myself from watching them twist and writhe in ways that defied logic. I had to get out of here. I turned another corner, heart thumping wildly in my chest. The street in front of me was narrow, the buildings on either side leaning in as if trying to trap me. It was a dead end. A dead end I hadn't noticed before. The world around me seemed to distort, bend, warp. The houses, once so familiar, now felt alien, their windows black and empty, staring at me with hollow eyes. The cold air, thick with fog, pressed in from all directions, and I could feel the weight of it, crushing the life out of me. I wasn't sure how long I'd been running. The hours had blurred together, the passage of time a distant memory. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Now I could feel it, whatever it was, getting closer. Then, something changed. The whisper. It was louder now, clearer than before. The voice, familiar and yet alien, cut through the fog and the silence. Turn around. I froze, my blood running cold. The voice wasn't in my head this time, it was real. I felt it, like a presence in the air, vibrating the very air around me. Turn around. The command was slow, deliberate, like the voice was savoring each word. I swallowed, the taste of fear thick in my mouth. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't. I knew that if I did, I wouldn't like what I saw. But there was something about the voice, something pulling me, urging me to look. I fought it. I shouldn't look. Not at what was behind me. But my body didn't listen. It turned on its own. I was met with darkness. But it wasn't just the fog. It was eyes. Hundreds of them, floating in the air like a swarm of insects, watching me from the shadows. They glowed faintly, their yellow eyes burning through the fog, empty and endless. There were so many of them, too many to count, each one staring at me with that same cold, unblinking gaze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, as though it were pulsing, vibrating with some kind of unseen energy. The eyes, there had to be hundreds, maybe thousands of them, shifted, their gaze following me, surrounding me, closing in. I tried to look away, but they were everywhere. I could feel them crawling across my skin, creeping into my mind. They were in my thoughts. "Don't run," the voice whispered again, and this time it was closer, right behind me. I didn't dare turn around, but I could feel it, the presence. It was there, right behind me, like something waiting to strike. "Don't run." The voice was calm now, almost soothing, as if it were trying to lull me into submission. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, locked in place, my mind screaming for me to run, to get away, but my feet refused to budge. The eyes in the darkness grew brighter, closer. They blinked. And then they spoke. "Stay with us." The words were like ice, cutting through the air with a sharpness that made my skin crawl. The voice, it was everywhere now, inside me, around me. The shadows had eyes, and they were watching me. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. I couldn't look away. "Stay," the voice whispered again, and the shadows began to shift, taking form. I finally broke free from the paralysis. I ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just ran. My breath ragged, heart pounding so loud it felt like it was going to burst from my chest. The eyes, they were still there, in the corners of my vision, watching me, following me. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. I had to get out. The shadows were closing in faster now. They were everywhere, crawling along the walls, sliding over the ground, like a living thing chasing me. But I couldn't outrun them. I couldn't outrun what was waiting in the dark. I couldn't remember how long I'd been running. My legs felt like lead, my breaths ragged and shallow, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when the shadows were still there, still pursuing me with that relentless, suffocating presence. Every turn I made, every street I ran down, only brought me deeper into the night. The fog had swallowed everything around me, my surroundings, my thoughts, and my sense of direction. I couldn't see the houses or the trees anymore. Just the heavy, crushing fog and the shadows that followed, creeping in from the corners of my eyes. The streets had become a blur. It was as though I was running in circles, my mind scrambling for any kind of sense, but there was none. No escape. No way out. I reached a corner, almost tripping over a loose brick in the street. My hands shot out to catch myself against the rough wall, but as I did, I froze. There, just ahead, was a house. An old, decaying structure I'd never seen before, one that definitely didn't belong on this street. The door was ajar, a dim light flickering from within. It was calling to me. I should have kept running. I should have turned and gone the other way. But instead, my body moved without thought, my feet carrying me toward the open door as though it were my only choice. I was being drawn to it, unable to resist. My pulse quickened, my skin tingled with a mixture of dread and something else, curiosity. The door was wide enough for me to slip through, and I did. The moment I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the world outside. I jumped at the sudden sound, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The silence that followed was even worse. I was trapped. The interior of the house was dark, save for the flickering light coming from a lone lamp in the corner of the room. The walls were lined with old, faded portraits, their subjects staring down at me with expressionless eyes. Their faces were blurred, their features indistinct, like they had been wiped away by time. The room itself seemed to stretch unnaturally, far longer than any room should be, and yet everything about it felt wrong. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic. A cold draft stirred through the room, but the lamp stayed lit, casting its sickly yellow light over the dust-covered furniture. I stepped further into the room, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and the sound made my skin crawl. I had to keep moving. Had to find something, anything, that would make sense of all this. That's when I saw it. A large, ornate mirror stood against the far wall, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust. I couldn't explain why, but something about it drew me in, like it was the only thing in this place that made sense. I took a hesitant step toward it, my reflection appearing dimly in the cracked glass. But as I moved closer, my reflection didn't follow. The image in the mirror, it wasn't me. A figure stood where I should have been, a shadowy silhouette with hollow, black eyes. The figure was still, staring at me through the glass with an unnerving calmness. My heart raced, a cold sweat forming on my forehead. I backed away from the mirror, my legs trembling beneath me. But the figure didn't move. It remained there, in the reflection, its eyes locked onto mine, a dark and empty stare. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched the cold surface of the glass. And then, as though it had been waiting for me, the figure in the mirror smiled. A slow, wide smile that wasn't mine. The smile was too wide, the edges of the lips stretching unnaturally. The black eyes gleamed with something dark, something twisted, and it wasn't human. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled backward, desperately trying to tear my gaze away, but I couldn't. I couldn't look away. A voice, that voice, whispered again, but this time it wasn't coming from the shadows. It was coming from the mirror. Stay. I swallowed hard, the air thick with fear and confusion. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My legs were locked, my body frozen in place. The smile in the mirror widened, impossibly so, until I felt like I was going to suffocate from the sheer wrongness of it. Stay with us, the voice whispered once more. The figure reached out a hand, its fingers elongated, too long, curling toward me through the glass. I recoiled, instinctively stepping back, but the hand, the shadow, followed. It pressed against the surface of the mirror, as if it were pushing itself through, breaking the barrier between reality and the reflection. And then, the glass began to ripple. The surface of the mirror shimmered, like water disturbed by a stone, and I could feel the coldness seep through the air. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stumbled back, but my feet wouldn't move fast enough. The hand in the mirror pressed forward, reaching, inching closer. I could feel it, a tangible coldness that seemed to reach into my very bones. The voice was louder now, a rasping whisper that slid into my mind. Come closer. I had to run. I turned, my legs finally working, propelling me toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, a force, an invisible grip, wrapped around my wrist, pulling me back. I screamed, but the sound died in my throat. The grip was too strong. It twisted, pulling me toward the mirror. I tried to fight it, to break free, but it was no use. The closer I got to the mirror, the colder I felt. The more my body froze, not from the chill in the room, but from something deeper, something far more terrifying. I was going to be taken. I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. With one final, desperate push, I yanked myself away, my body crashing into the wooden floor. The force released me, and I scrambled toward the door. My chest heaved with panic, my heart thundering in my ears as I reached the exit. I wrenched the door open and stepped back into the night, slamming it shut behind me. The fog was thicker now. The air felt heavier. But I was out. And yet, as I looked back toward the house, I could see the mirror through the window. The reflection was waiting. The eyes, the figure, it was all still there. Watching me. Waiting for me to return. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. I could still feel the cold. It clung to me like a second skin, refusing to let go. The chill from the house, from the mirror, from whatever it was, that thing, still pulsed through my veins. I could hear my own breath as I stumbled through the fog, the world around me twisting and warping with every step. The streetlights were barely visible now, their glow swallowed by the dense mist, and every sound felt muffled, distant. I was lost. Completely lost. My mind was a blur. The images of the mirror, of that thing in the reflection, kept flashing in front of me. The hollow eyes, that wide smile, it wasn't real. It couldn't have been. But somehow, I knew deep down that it was. It was real, and it was waiting. Watching. I wasn't sure how long I had been walking, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to. Every step was one more closer to something I couldn't understand. The streets were foreign now, even the familiar ones. The houses I'd once passed without a second thought now seemed to leer at me from behind the veil of fog. Their windows, black and lifeless, seemed to follow my every move. I could hear the faint rustling of something just out of sight, scraping sounds, whispers, like the wind was carrying secrets I didn't want to hear. I paused for a moment, my hand resting against a fence, trying to steady my breathing. The air felt thick, as though I was suffocating. My mind was racing, frantic with thoughts of what I had seen, of what had touched me. The mirror. The hand. The voice. Stay with us. I shook my head, trying to clear it, but the whisper clung to me, deeper now, echoing in my skull. The fear was thick, heavy in my chest, squeezing out all rational thought. What did it mean? What did it want? I had to face it. There was no running away from this. The mirror, the figure in it, it wasn't just some random nightmare. It was part of something much larger. Something older. Something that had been watching me, waiting for me. The thought sent a shudder down my spine. I didn't know how I knew this, but it was undeniable. And then, as if the fog had thickened just enough to make the shadows stretch and bend even further, I saw something. A figure. It stood at the end of the street, just at the edge of the fog, almost as if it had materialized out of the mist itself. I couldn't make out any details at first. Just a dark shape, standing perfectly still, watching me. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I wondered if I had somehow slipped into another nightmare, one where the rules of the world no longer applied. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stared. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest, my legs trembling beneath me. But I couldn't look away. I wasn't alone. It didn't speak, but I felt the weight of its gaze, a silent pressure that pressed on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I took another step back, unsure if I should turn and run, or if I should keep facing this thing. Then the voice came again. Not from the figure in the fog, but from inside me. It's too late. The whisper was soft, almost a caress, but it felt like a warning. A truth I couldn't ignore. The figure took a step forward. Then another. I stood frozen in place. My mind was screaming for me to move, to run, to escape, but I couldn't. It was as if something had latched onto me, holding me in place, forcing me to stay. The figure's steps were slow, deliberate, each one coming closer until the gap between us had almost disappeared. It wasn't just the figure that had moved. The world around me had changed. The fog had thickened to an almost suffocating level. The houses, those once familiar houses, now seemed to press in on me, their features blurring and twisting. The streets no longer felt like streets. The world felt unreal, as though I was standing in the middle of something wrong. The figure was almost close enough for me to see it clearly now. But I didn't want to. It was wrong. Its form was distorted, as though it wasn't quite there. Like it was made of shadows, flickering in and out of existence. The face, if you could even call it that, was a void, a blackness that stretched too wide for any human face. There were no features, no eyes, no mouth, just endless darkness, swallowing everything it touched. And it was getting closer. I could feel it now, the presence, the weight of it. It pressed against me, like a storm, like something that was too large, too much to contain. The fear in me was no longer just a sensation, it was an overwhelming force, suffocating me from the inside. Stay. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My breath was caught in my throat, my chest tightening with the weight of the fear that threatened to crush me. My legs were frozen, unable to move even as the figure came closer, its presence filling the air like a thick, cold fog. I was trapped. And then, in that moment, I realized something. The voice, the thing in the mirror, hadn't been trying to pull me into the glass. No. It had been pulling me into the darkness. The same darkness that now stood before me, pressing on all sides. The question, the choice, was before me. The voice was offering me something. A chance to step into the dark, to give in. But at what cost? It wasn't just the mirror. It wasn't just the house or the fog. It was everything. The shadows, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, followed, it was all part of something greater, something ancient. And it was waiting for me to make my final decision. Would I step forward? Would I face it, let it consume me? Or would I fight? Would I run even though I knew it was too late? I had one chance. One final choice. I took a step forward. And the darkness opened up to swallow me whole. What if the smallest noise could unravel a web of secrets? The rain drummed against the window, a constant rhythm that echoed through the empty room. I sat at my cluttered desk, surrounded by files and photographs, my mind heavy with the weight of unsolved cases. Each image seemed to stare back at me, beckoning me to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface. But there was something more. A strange sensation prickled at the back of my neck, an unsettling feeling that I was not alone in my thoughts. I am Alex Monroe, a private investigator with a knack for piecing together the jigsaw puzzles of human behavior. I had seen a lot in my years of work, betrayal, love, and loss, but the case before me was different. A seemingly random incident, a car crash on the outskirts of town, had sparked a series of events that felt orchestrated, like a conductor leading a symphony. As I leaned back in my chair, the scent of damp wood mixed with stale coffee filled my lungs, grounding me and reminding me of the weight of what I had to uncover. The flickering light above me buzzed erratically, casting shadows that danced across the walls. It was late, and the house was cloaked in darkness, save for my desk lamp, which provided a fragile haven of light. I glanced at the clock, 2 hours past midnight. My fingers drummed against the desk, matching the beat of the rain outside. I was exhausted, but the thrill of the investigation kept me awake, alert. Suddenly, a soft sound broke the silence, a faint scratching noise, like nails on a chalkboard. My heart raced. I froze, straining to listen. The sound was gone, but the air felt charged, heavy with tension. Had I imagined it? I shook my head, trying to dispel the creeping unease. Yet, deep down, I knew that something was off. With a sigh, I returned to the case file. The accident had involved a young woman named Clara, whose life had been cut short in an instant. But the details surrounding her death were murky. Witnesses claimed to see something strange in the moments before the crash, flashes of light, a figure in the distance. I could almost feel Clara's presence in the room, urging me to find the answers she couldn't share. As I pored over the police reports, I felt a chill brush against my skin. I glanced around the dim room, half expecting to see a figure lurking in the shadows. Nothing. Just the shadows twisting in the corners, waiting, watching. I rubbed my arms, the goosebumps rising like tiny mountains. I needed to shake this feeling off, to focus on the task at hand. The rain picked up, lashing against the windows with renewed fervor. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, grounding myself in the rhythm of the storm. That's when I heard it again, a low murmur, like a distant whisper carried by the wind. My heart pounded, and I opened my eyes wide. The noise was softer now, almost melodic, blending with the rain. "Clara," I whispered, half believing she might hear me. "What happened to you?" In that moment, I felt the room shift. The familiar surroundings began to feel foreign, the photographs on the wall becoming distorted in my vision. I was no longer just investigating a case. I was drawn into a deeper mystery, one that intertwined with my own fears and uncertainties. The mundane world outside faded away, replaced by the ethereal whispers of the unknown. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. I needed air. As I moved toward the window, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the corner of my eye. A shadow? My pulse quickened. I turned to face the source of the disturbance, but nothing was there. Just darkness. Stepping outside onto the porch, I was met by the cool air, thick with the smell of rain-soaked earth. The streetlights flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow onto the pavement. The world felt different, alive and watchful. I could almost sense the tension in the atmosphere, a hum of energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. As I stood there, I felt a weight in my chest, a nagging feeling that this investigation was leading me somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. The shadows seemed to creep closer, and I instinctively looked over my shoulder. Just the night, vast and empty, but it felt like eyes were watching from the depths. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I could not allow fear to dictate my actions. I was a detective, trained to uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. I needed to return to my files, to dig deeper into Clara's life. There had to be a reason her death had stirred something in me, a connection waiting to be revealed. As I turned to go back inside, I noticed something glimmering on the ground, a small pendant, half buried in the dirt. I bent down to pick it up, and a shiver coursed through me. The pendant was intricately designed, a delicate silver filigree that seemed almost out of place. It felt warm in my hand, as if it had been waiting for me. "Where did you come from?" I murmured to myself. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this Clara's? I felt a pulse of energy radiating from it, a connection to the past that beckoned me to follow. As I stood there, holding the pendant, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something much larger than just a simple investigation. Clara's death was only the beginning. The echoes of silence would soon unravel, revealing the tangled threads of a story that demanded to be told. With resolve, I made my way back inside, the pendant clutched tightly in my hand. I would uncover the truth behind Clara's death. I would follow the threads, no matter where they led. The shadows might linger, but I was ready to face them. I had a story to unravel, and I would not rest until the last thread was pulled. The pendant felt cool against my palm as I returned to my cluttered desk. I set it down carefully, examining its intricate design. Every twist and turn of the silver seemed to tell a story, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it held secrets of its own. I leaned closer, the soft light of my desk lamp illuminating the fine details. Perhaps it was a clue, a tangible connection to Clara that might lead me deeper into the mystery surrounding her death. As I resumed my research, the rain continued to fall outside, a steady reminder of the night's ominous energy. I flicked through the pages of Clara's case file, focusing on her life before the accident. At 24, she was a vibrant artist known for her striking landscapes. But there were gaps in her story, missing pieces that hinted at a troubled past. My phone buzzed, breaking my concentration. I glanced at the screen, an incoming message from my friend and colleague, Rachel. "Hey, I found something interesting about Clara. Call me when you can." Curiosity piqued, I quickly dialed her number. "Rachel, what did you find?" "Alex, you won't believe this. I was digging through old reports, and I came across a case from 2 years ago, a break-in at an art gallery. Clara's work was displayed there at the time. One of the stolen pieces was a painting she created." A chill ran down my spine. "Are you saying someone targeted her?" "Exactly. And here's the kicker. The gallery owner mentioned seeing a man lurking around before the break-in. He described him as unsettling. I'm sending you the details now." I felt a mix of excitement and dread as I listened to Rachel. The pieces of Clara's life were starting to connect, forming a web that stretched back further than I had imagined. I thanked Rachel and ended the call, feeling a renewed sense of urgency. I needed to get to that gallery. The rain had slowed to a drizzle as I grabbed my coat and the pendant, slipping it into my pocket. The air outside felt thick, heavy with the weight of secrets. The streets glistened under the streetlights, reflecting the distorted images of the world around me. I tried to shake off the unease that clung to me, the sense that something was watching from the shadows. As I approached the gallery, its facade loomed ahead, a combination of modern architecture and artistic flair. But tonight, it felt foreboding, almost haunted. I pushed open the door, the soft chime of a bell announcing my arrival. The scent of paint and varnish lingered in the air, a reminder of the creativity that once thrived within these walls. The gallery was mostly empty, save for a few lingering patrons and the soft hum of conversation. I made my way to the front desk, where a young woman sat, her eyes focused on her laptop. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady but laced with urgency. "I'm looking for information about a past exhibit, specifically one featuring Clara's work." She looked up, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "Clara Adams? That was a few years ago. What do you need?" "I heard about a break-in during her exhibit. I'm investigating her death, and I believe it might be connected." Her expression shifted, and I saw a flicker of recognition. Ah, yes. That was a strange time. Clara was so talented, but the gallery was on edge because of that break-in. They never found the stolen painting. I leaned in closer, sensing that she had more to say. Did anyone unusual come by during the exhibit? Someone who might have been watching her? The woman hesitated, then nodded slowly. There was a man, a regular. He seemed fixated on Clara's work. I remember he lingered longer than most. It was unsettling, like he was waiting for her to notice him. I thought it was odd, but... I pressed, my heart racing. I don't know. It just felt wrong. He never introduced himself. Then, after the break-in, I never saw him again. Do you have a description? She thought for a moment. He was tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Wore a long coat, even in summer. I remember thinking he looked like he belonged in a different time. I jotted down her description, a sense of dread creeping in. This man could be the link between Clara's past and the events surrounding her death. Thank you, I said, feeling a sense of urgency. If you remember anything else, please let me know. As I stepped outside, the drizzle had turned into a light mist. I pulled my coat tighter around me, thoughts racing. The connection between Clara's death and the gallery was becoming clearer, but I still felt lost in a maze of uncertainty. I wandered through the nearby park, seeking a moment of clarity amid the chaos of my thoughts. The mist curled around the trees, wrapping the world in a shroud of mystery. I spotted a bench and sat down, the cold metal biting against my skin. I pulled out the pendant, letting it rest on my palm. Its warmth was strangely comforting, grounding me in the midst of the swirling doubts. What had Clara gotten herself into? I could almost hear her laughter echoing in the stillness, the ghost of her presence urging me forward. But the shadows were thickening, and I felt them closing in. Suddenly, a movement caught my eye, a figure lurking in the distance, hidden among the trees. My heart raced, a primal instinct urging me to flee. But I couldn't. This was part of the investigation. I needed to confront whatever lay ahead. I rose from the bench, clutching the pendant tightly. I moved cautiously toward the figure, every step amplifying the tension in the air. As I approached, the figure emerged from the shadows. A man. Tall, with dark hair and striking blue eyes. Can I help you? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was the man from the gallery. My breath caught in my throat as he looked me directly in the eye, an unsettling smile creeping across his face. I've been waiting for you, Alex, he said, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic. I took a step back, heart racing. The shadows had begun to close in, and I knew that whatever lay ahead was more than just an investigation. It was a confrontation with the past, a plunge into the unknown. Who are you? I demanded, trying to maintain my composure as the tension thickened around us. His smile widened, an almost predatory gleam in his eyes. Let's just say, I have answers to questions you haven't even thought to ask yet. The air crackled with unspoken danger, and in that moment, I understood. I was standing on the precipice of something far more complex than I had imagined. The threads of Clara's story were tangled with my own, and the unraveling was just beginning. His smile sent a shiver down my spine. The man stepped closer, the shadows flickering around him like a dark cloak. My instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but curiosity anchored me in place. What do you know about Clara? I demanded, my voice firmer than I felt. The man tilted his head, as if considering my question. Clara was an artist, yes, but she was also a keeper of secrets. Do you really think her death was just an accident? I frowned, trying to read his expression. There was a glint in his blue eyes that felt both enticing and menacing. What do you mean? What secrets? He laughed softly, a sound that echoed in the stillness of the park, and it sent another wave of unease through me. You're diving headfirst into something that runs deeper than you realize. But tell me, Alex, what makes you think you can uncover the truth? You're already in over your head. I stood my ground, despite the turmoil inside me. I've handled tough cases before. I won't back down now. He studied me, his gaze penetrating. That's admirable. But this isn't just a case, it's a thread connecting lives, events long buried. Then tell me, I urged, what do you know about that night? About the break-in? For a moment, he was silent, the mist swirling around us. I was there, watching. I saw Clara's potential, her drive. But I also saw the darkness that surrounded her. Darkness? What are you talking about? My heart raced, each word laced with urgency. I needed answers. Clara had enemies, people who wanted to silence her, to erase her work. The break-in was a warning, a signal to her to step back, he replied, his voice lowering to a whisper. But she didn't listen. She kept painting, kept exposing the truth. Exposing the truth? About what? I pressed, desperate for clarity. He glanced around, ensuring we were still alone, then leaned in closer, his breath a whisper against my ear. Clara's art was more than just landscapes. They were stories, stories of those who had suffered, hidden beneath layers of paint. The break-in was about control, a message. The pieces began to fall into place, but my mind struggled to grasp the enormity of his claim. And you were watching? Why? I was interested in her work, in her story. But I didn't want to be seen, he replied, his tone turning serious. She was uncovering a truth that went beyond her. That's why I'm here now. You're following in her footsteps, and I need to warn you. A chill washed over me. Warn me? About what? About the people who silenced Clara. They're still out there, and they're watching you too. His words hung heavy in the air, each syllable resonating with the weight of danger. I took a step back, reeling from the implications. How do you know all this? Because I've been tracking them for years. I know their methods, their patterns. They won't stop until they're certain you're not a threat. He paused, his expression shifting to one of concern. You need to be careful, Alex. The deeper you dig, the more they'll want to silence you. Why should I trust you? I shot back, skepticism boiling inside me. Because I have information you need, and I can help you, he replied, his tone earnest. But you have to let me guide you. You can't do this alone. I hesitated, my mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Trusting him could be a mistake, but ignoring his warning felt like a bigger risk. The shadows loomed, and I was already entangled in this web. What do you want in return? I asked, cautious. He smiled again, though this time it was softer, almost genuine. Just your trust. For now. I'll show you where to start digging, but you have to promise to be careful. Show me? I repeated, uncertainty gnawing at me. Where? Back at the gallery, he said, pointing toward the path leading away from the park. There's something there you need to see, something Clara left behind. With a deep breath, I made a decision. Fine. Lead the way. But if this is a trap... It's not, he interrupted, sincerity shining in his eyes. You need to know the truth. I promise, I want to help. As we walked, the night felt charged with a new energy. I glanced at him, trying to gauge his intentions. What if he was lying? But part of me felt drawn to his knowledge, to the mystery that surrounded Clara. The gallery was quiet as we entered. The faint sound of rain tapping against the windows created an atmosphere of suspense. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as we moved deeper inside, the shadows stretching and twisting with every step. Where do we go? I whispered, glancing around for signs of danger. He led me to a small, dimly lit storage room at the back of the gallery. In here, he said, pushing the door open. Inside, the room was filled with forgotten pieces of art, canvases stacked against the walls like memories waiting to be rediscovered. Clara's work is here? I asked, scanning the room. Not all of it. But there's something specific. He knelt by a dusty crate in the corner, pulling out a tattered notebook. This belonged to her. I crouched beside him, my heart racing as he handed it to me. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with Clara's handwriting, notes, sketches, thoughts. I opened it cautiously, a rush of emotion flooding through me as I realized the depth of her passion. Read the last few pages, he urged, his voice low. I flipped through the pages, finally landing on the last entries. Clara's handwriting was frantic, the ink smudged as if she had been writing in haste. They're watching me, one entry read. I can feel it. I've uncovered something, but I'm not sure what it is. It's bigger than me. My breath caught in my throat. What did she discover? I don't know, he admitted, but I suspect it's linked to her art, to the stories she was telling. She was onto something, and that's why they silenced her. I flipped back through the pages, feeling the weight of her fear and determination. Each line was a glimpse into her soul, a woman caught in a storm she couldn't control. This could lead us somewhere, I murmured, hope mingling with dread. Exactly. But we need to be smart about this, he replied, urgency creeping into his tone. We have to figure out who these people are and what they want. As I closed the notebook, a realization hit me. The pendant. Clara's pendant. It's connected to this. It has to be. He nodded, his expression grave. If it belonged to her, it might hold a clue. You should keep it safe. With the notebook and the pendant, I felt a sense of purpose igniting within me. This wasn't just about Clara anymore, it was about unearthing a truth that had been buried too long. I glanced at the man beside me, weighing the choice ahead. If we're going to do this, I need to know your name, I said firmly. He met my gaze, a flicker of respect in his eyes. You can call me James. James, I repeated, committing the name to memory. Let's find out what Clara was trying to tell us. As we stepped out of the storage room, the night felt different, charged with possibility and danger. Together, we were about to unravel a story that had been waiting to be told, but I could feel the shadows lurking, eager to pull us back into darkness. This was just the beginning, and I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped outside the gallery. The city hummed softly around us, a comforting backdrop that felt increasingly foreign. The notes from Clara's notebook buzzed in my mind, each word a reminder of the danger that lurked beneath the surface. The sky hung heavy with clouds, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Where to now?" I asked James, trying to keep my voice steady despite the unease coiling in my stomach. "We need to find out more about the people connected to Clara's art," he replied, scanning our surroundings. "There might be others who knew what she was involved in." I nodded, still clutching the notebook tightly to my chest. "What about the gallery owner? Could he help us?" James hesitated, his brow furrowing. "He's likely involved in this mess. If he knew Clara was in danger, he might have turned a blind eye to protect his own interests." The realization hit me hard. "So, who can we trust?" "We'll have to tread carefully," he said. "There are places we can check, old art collectives, underground exhibits. Clara was part of a network. They might know what happened." As we walked through the misty streets, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Each shadow seemed to twist and turn, hiding something just out of sight. The pendant nestled against my chest felt like a beacon, both guiding me and warning me of the unknown. "Let's start at the Old Art Collective on Mercer Street," James suggested. It was a hub for artists before the city gentrified. Clara might have mentioned it in her notes. We made our way through the winding alleys, the atmosphere thickening with tension. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling with unease. As we approached the collective, I felt a pulse of anticipation. The building stood tall, its brick facade covered in colorful murals that had faded over the years. The entrance was marked by a wooden door, slightly ajar, inviting yet foreboding. I pushed the door open, the creak echoing through the empty space inside. The dim light revealed scattered canvases and sculptures, remnants of creativity that once thrived here. A sense of history hung heavy in the air, each piece whispering stories of passion and struggle. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The silence was deafening, amplifying the pounding of my heart. James stepped in beside me, his gaze sweeping the room. "We should look around. Clara might have left something here." We split up, each of us scouring the remnants of the collective. I moved cautiously through the room, my fingers grazing the surfaces of dusty canvases. They felt like forgotten dreams, abandoned stories that still held a flicker of life. As I wandered deeper into the space, a sound caught my attention, a soft rustling, like fabric brushing against fabric. I paused, straining to listen. My breath quickened. "James?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. No response came. The rustling continued, this time accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. My heart raced, a primal instinct urging me to retreat. But my feet remained rooted to the spot. "Who's there?" I called, attempting to mask the tremor in my voice. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, her features obscured by the dim light. She stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost ethereal. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low and urgent. I glanced back toward the entrance, but James was still searching. "I'm looking for information about Clara," I replied, my curiosity overcoming my fear. "Do you know her?" The woman's eyes widened, recognition flickering across her face. "Clara?" "Yes, I knew her. She was onto something important." "What do you mean?" I pressed, stepping closer. "Can you help us?" She hesitated, glancing around as if checking for unseen eyes. "They're watching. You must be careful. If they find out you're asking questions, it could be dangerous." Who's watching? I demanded, urgency bubbling inside me. People who want to keep the truth buried, she whispered, her voice trembling. Clara was drawing connections between Ark and the past, connections that some would do anything to hide. The weight of her words settled over me like a fog. Do you have any proof? Anything that can help? She nodded, her expression shifting to one of determination. I have something, an old photograph Clara gave me. It has names written on the back. People who might be involved in whatever she was uncovering. My heart raced with hope. Can I see it? The woman reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. But you have to promise me you'll be careful. If you dig too deep, you might find more than you bargained for. I took the photo from her, my hands trembling. It depicted a group of artists, their faces vibrant and alive. I turned it over, and there, in Clara's distinct handwriting, were names I didn't recognize. But one stood out, a name that felt like a jolt of electricity. Lydia Hart, I read aloud, the name echoing in my mind. Who is she? The woman's expression turned grave. She was a prominent figure in the art world. But there are whispers, dark whispers, that she was involved in more than just promoting artists. If Clara was investigating her, it could explain why she was targeted. Fear twisted in my gut as I processed the information. We need to find Lydia. She might have answers. The woman shook her head. Be cautious. She has a reputation for being ruthless. Many who cross her paths disappear. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me. James! I called out, my voice urgent. The footsteps stopped, and James appeared, concern etched across his face. What's going on? Listen, we found someone who knew Clara, I said, turning back to the woman. But she was already fading into the shadows, her figure melting into the darkness of the collective. Wait! I shouted, but she was gone. James stepped closer, eyeing me curiously. What did she say? Clara was onto something much bigger. There's a name, Lydia Hart. We need to find her, I explained, my voice laced with urgency. Lydia Hart? James repeated, his brow furrowing. I've heard of her. She's not just an art dealer, she's deeply connected to powerful people. This could be dangerous. Dangerous? It already is, I said, my heart racing. But if we don't pursue this, we might never uncover the truth. James sighed, his expression shifting to one of determination. All right. But we need to be strategic. If Lydia is as connected as you say, we need a plan. We left the collective, the night air thick with foreboding. As we walked, I felt the weight of Clara's notebook and the photograph pressing against me, a reminder of the journey ahead. Where do we start? I asked, my voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in my mind. We should find out where Lydia is currently operating, James replied. There are rumors about a new exhibit she's organizing. It could be our best chance to confront her. Then let's do it, I said, a sense of resolve washing over me. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to unravel the tangled threads of Clara's story. But as we moved through the city streets, I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. The shadows seemed to lengthen behind us, whispering secrets I wasn't yet ready to hear. The night was far from over, and I knew that the deeper we dug, the more dangerous the game would become. The city felt alive around us, yet I was hyper-aware of every shadow and flicker of movement. Each step we took echoed with the weight of unspoken danger. The photograph of Clara's friends, along with Lydia Hart's name, burned in my pocket like a hot coal, fueling my determination. Do you have any idea where we can find Lydia? I asked James, quickening my pace as we navigated through the bustling streets. He paused, considering. There's a gallery she frequents. It's known for showcasing emerging artists and, reportedly, it's where she conducts some of her more unsavory business. Can we get in? I questioned, curiosity mixed with anxiety. Easier said than done, James replied. The gallery is invitation only, and even then, you need connections to get past the doorman. But if we can find someone who knows her, or someone connected to that scene, we might stand a chance. I felt a surge of hope and fear intertwine. Let's hit the pavement then. We need to gather intel. As we walked, I couldn't help but notice the city's pulse. The night air buzzed with conversations, laughter, and the faint sounds of music spilling from bars. Yet, beneath it all, I felt a darker current, an undercurrent of something sinister lurking just beyond our view. We arrived at a nearby cafe, a cozy spot that seemed to attract the artsy crowd. This is a good place to start, James said, his eyes scanning the room. Let's see if we can find anyone who might know something about Lydia. We entered, the aroma of coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. The walls were adorned with local art, vibrant and chaotic, echoing the very essence of creativity. I felt a pang of nostalgia. This was the world Clara had loved. Stay close, James instructed as we navigated through the small tables. I nodded, my senses heightened. We approached the barista, a young woman with brightly colored hair and piercings that told stories of rebellion. Excuse me, James said, leaning casually against the counter. We're looking for someone who might know Lydia Hart. Heard she's a regular here. The barista raised an eyebrow, a hint of recognition flickering across her face. Lydia? She comes in occasionally. But good luck getting her attention. She's a busy woman. Any chance you could tell us when she's likely to be here next? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Sorry, I can't help you with that, she replied, her expression shifting to one of guardedness. She's pretty private about her schedule. But you might want to check out the gallery on 4th. She had an exhibit there last week. Thanks for the tip, James said, shooting me a glance. We exited the cafe, a mix of frustration and urgency swirling within me. The gallery on 4th. It's a lead, I said, trying to keep my spirits up. Let's move then, James replied, determination etched on his face. As we walked, the atmosphere grew thicker, as if the city itself held its breath. We navigated through crowded streets, past vendors packing up for the night, until we finally reached the gallery. The building loomed ahead, its facade illuminated by harsh lights that flickered ominously. We approached the entrance, where a bouncer stood, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. My stomach churned with anxiety. Here goes nothing, I murmured, glancing at James. We stepped forward, and James cleared his throat. We're here to see Lydia Hart, he stated, attempting to sound confident. The bouncer regarded us with a skeptical eye. Invitation only. Do you have one? I felt my heart drop. No, but we really need to speak with her. It's important, I pleaded, trying to project sincerity. Important? The bouncer raised an eyebrow. That's what everyone says. Unless you have an invite, I can't let you in. I glanced at James, frustration brewing. We don't have time for this. We're trying to uncover the truth about Clara's death. At the mention of Clara's name, the bouncer hesitated, his expression shifting. You're talking about the artist? The one who? Yes. I interrupted, eager to seize the moment. We believe her death is linked to Lydia Hart. We need to talk to her. The bouncer sighed, looking conflicted. Look, I can't just let anyone in. But he glanced around, ensuring no one was watching. If you wait around the side entrance, I might be able to slip you in. But you didn't hear it from me. James and I exchanged glances, the tension palpable. Thank you, I breathed, relief flooding through me. We hurried to the side of the gallery, our hearts pounding in unison. Now what? I whispered, peering around the corner. Just wait, James replied, his voice steady. We'll follow the bouncer when he comes back. As we stood in the shadows, I could feel the weight of Clara's notebook pressing against me, a constant reminder of the stakes. I had to find answers about her, about Lydia, about everything that had transpired. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, the bouncer reappeared, glancing around before nodding toward us. Now, he hissed. We stepped out of the shadows and followed him through a narrow alleyway that led to a discreet entrance at the back of the gallery. The door swung open, and we stepped inside, a world of vibrant art and bustling conversation greeting us. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, filled with the chatter of guests and the clinking of glasses. The walls were adorned with stunning pieces, each telling a story of its own. But amidst the beauty, I felt the tension coil tighter. Stay close, James whispered as we made our way deeper into the gallery. I scanned the crowd, searching for Lydia. A part of me was terrified of what I might find. Would she recognize me as a threat? Would she know I was coming for the truth? Suddenly, I spotted her, a striking woman in a tailored black dress, her presence commanding the room. Lydia Hart stood near a large canvas, discussing its merits with an intrigued group of onlookers. There she is, I breathed, my heart racing. James took a deep breath, steeling himself. We need to approach her carefully. We can't draw attention. We edged closer, listening in on her conversation. Art has a way of revealing truths that people want to keep hidden, Lydia was saying, her voice smooth yet filled with an underlying menace. It's a powerful tool, and those who understand that can wield it to their advantage. The group around her nodded, captivated by her words. I felt a chill creep down my spine. She was not just an art dealer, she was a puppeteer, manipulating the strings of those around her. Excuse me, I said, mustering my courage as I stepped forward. The moment I spoke, all eyes turned to me, and Lydia's gaze locked onto mine, sharp and piercing. And who might you be? She asked, a hint of amusement dancing in her eyes. Alex, I replied, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. I'm here about Clara. At the mention of Clara's name, the atmosphere shifted. The group's chatter fell silent, and Lydia's expression darkened. Clara was an artist, a talent wasted. What do you want with her memory? I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I believe her death is connected to something larger. I need to understand what happened. Lydia stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Some truths are better left buried, Alex. You're poking around in places you shouldn't. You may find yourself in deeper waters than you anticipate. I stood my ground, adrenaline coursing through me. I won't back down. Clara deserves justice. A slow smile spread across Lydia's face, but there was no warmth in it, only a chilling reminder of the danger ahead. Justice? In this world? How naive. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the gallery. The crowd parted as a group of men entered, their expressions fierce and predatory. My instincts flared, and I felt the tension in the air shift once more. Lydia's demeanor changed instantly. "You need to leave," she hissed, her voice low and urgent. "Now." But it was too late. The men were moving toward us, eyes locked on Lydia, and the tension crackled like electricity. "James, we need to go," I shouted, panic surging through me. Before I could turn, a hand gripped my arm tightly. I spun around to find one of the men staring at me, his eyes cold and calculating. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and menacing. "Let go of me," I protested, struggling against his grip. "Not until we have a word," he replied, pulling me closer to him. James stepped in front of me, ready to defend, but Lydia interjected. "Wait. This isn't the place for this." The tension hung thick in the air, each second stretching into eternity. I could feel my heart racing, the stakes rising with every passing moment. The shadows were closing in, and the truth was slipping further away. "Follow my lead," Lydia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We need to get out of here before it's too late." I looked at James, his face a mixture of confusion and determination. "We have to trust her," I said, knowing full well the risks involved. Together, we followed Lydia through the crowd, navigating the chaos as the men closed in behind us. The gallery, once filled with beauty and intrigue, now felt like a trap. I knew that we were walking into the unknown, but there was no turning back. As we slipped out a side exit, the night air hit me like a wave, invigorating yet terrifying. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. We were on the brink of uncovering something far more profound than I had ever imagined, something that could change everything. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.